All right, what a great episode to the series Who Killed WCW. This episode was interesting because it put me on to some things that I kind of forgotten over the years. Because, of course, like I said in the first video that I cut about this in part one, me being my age, growing up in the 90s, I'm very accustomed to basically how this came apart. Even after Vince came in and purchased the company, they made documentaries in the 2000s. It's been all over the place. I've heard the interviews as far as Bret Hart and others over time, over the decades. So you kind of get a sense of what happened. But when you get this part two episode, you kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of changed my perspective a little bit as far as Eric Bischoff being kind of the everyone likes to blame Eric Bischoff. He's the easiest person to blame because he was really the founder or the creator of the new wave when it came to WCW and the production and the media side of it. So once things went bad, predictably, he had to take the brunt of the blame. But once the episode goes a little down the road, it goes into the other uncontrollable elements that Eric just didn't have a beat on because he just people above him had other agendas. So I'll get to that part. But the episode started off with the momentum being gone. WCW lost the 83-week lead. Now Raw has taken the lead because, mainly because of the Attitude Era coming in, Mike Tyson, all these, DX, all this crazy shit is going on. So predictably, with a change in content comes a change in viewership. And it definitely helped Vince McMahon and retake the lead. Now, that being said, WCW wasn't far behind. It wasn't like, they were getting their asses kicked or anything. They just lost the lead they had for 83 weeks. Now, you know, now that they're losing because their competitors, their competition on the other side, they've turned turned up the volume basically. They're giving a more looter product, a more mature product than even WCW. So the higher ups at WCW didn't like what WWF at the time was doing, and they told Eric, "Hey, we want you guys to make this more friendly, family friendly. Basically, turn it back into old WCW, where they were getting their asses kicked and they were just unthought of." So you have this thing being the first major change because now you have a change in content. The things you were accustomed to doing for the first few years as you took the lead over WWF is gone now. Now corporate heads up top are telling you, Eric, you know what? Can you dial it back a little bit? We don't like the lewd, crude acts. We just want you guys to be a little more family friendly. And family friendly brings no ratings. Zero. Because WCW was experiencing that before Eric got there. So now Eric has to deal with that part. What was very apparent in this episode was that the corporate machine that was running Ted Turner's operation, they didn't want WCW to succeed. There was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of envy. These guys were controlling the primetime position at 8 o'clock on both networks. And a lot of guys didn't like it. A lot of guys didn't understand wrestling. A lot of guys didn't, want it on the network at all to begin with. So there was um, a slow sabotaging that was going on with the company before the bad creative decisions started to really take WCW apart. The screws was really screwed in on them when it came to the financial part and the higher ups. When you start to lose some of the creative freedom you once had, then you kind of got your hands tied behind your back in certain situations. When you got Raw going crazy and DX and The Rock and his insults and Stone Cold, and you got a bunch of shit going on, then yeah, you got to keep up with that. And if the higher ups that's cutting the checks are telling you, no, you can't match what they're doing, you have to actually dial it way back. How are you supposed to win? So it was an uphill climb from that point on. But they did bring up some other things. Like I thought it was interesting that Hulk Hogan called Eric Bischoff and pretty much gave Bischoff the idea to put Goldberg over in his hometown in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Georgia Dome, which is pretty ironic because again, this is I want to give Eric bail. I want to give Eric um a benefit of the doubt. But it's situations like this that it just doesn't paint a great picture of Eric because here is another moment where you got Hogan dictating the terms and literally coming up with the ideas and the creative, and you're just backing it. Now, granted, this is probably the best thing Hogan did in his time there, which is great because Hogan was all about Hogan, but he did even Hogan, as selfish as he is, knew that putting over Bill Goldberg was going to draw money. Even he knew that. So credit to him for even giving the call to Eric and having the wherewithal to know that putting Goldberg over at the time was good business because man, everybody talked about it. I remember being in middle school talking about that. We were geeked out of our minds because again, you got 40,000 strong in the Georgia Dome going crazy for Bill Goldberg. And this is some shit we would expect to see on, pay per view. But Eric was giving it to us right on TV. You could say it's bad business. In some situations, it is. But Eric mindset was, yo, I'm going to give these main event style main matches on television because I'm trying to pop the rating so advertisers can spend more dough to get those slots, which is it's a normal thing. It's what TV people do. It's common sense. I worked in radio before and it's no different. It's both traditional mediums. And that's that basically what his mindset was at the time. And you got to remember, he's in the beginnings of his whole career. He doesn't have the runway or the head start that Vince has. He's kind of adapt and move and move and move while he's going. And then you got the corporate overlords coming down and putting their thumb on you, and it just makes it even more difficult. But let me get back to the board. Kevin Nash, because of the corporate, pressures, he then offers himself to be the head booker. Now, this was another mistake by Eric, but Eric at the time is going through the most stressful time of his life when it comes to dealing with the corporate structure of Turner and what's going on at Time Warner and just a lot of things that he had to worry about where Nash offered his help and it was just a bad idea. You cannot give one of your top stars creative control, especially when they may book themselves in situations that of course would best represent them. So I thought it was interesting hearing Nash's side of the token when it came to Bill Goldberg and when he put himself over Bill at that pay-per-view where legendarily when Scott Hall came out as the dressed up security guard and had the taser and tased Goldberg. Now that was a cool way to put Goldberg down because it was believable. It was like this guy is a fucking indestructible machine going through everyone. You could almost he can't get hurt. So for Scott or I guess Kevin to book it that way and make Goldberg look strong as he lost. I mean, yeah, he lost. I seen his. I understand Kevin Nash's his viewpoint of it. He thinks like now, granted, I think it was wrong to to cancel out Goldberg's streak at this moment, but I looking at it from how I think Kevin was thinking was like, yo, this guy has gone through the entire roster. We don't have anyone left that's believable that can take the strap off of this dude. But me. I'm the biggest guy here. We haven't met yet. It made sense. But putting yourself over the hottest guy in the company at the wrong time didn't help matters either. And then slowly after that, The finger poke of doom happened because Hogan inserted himself in the storyline, took away Goldberg's rematch because he has full creative control. So, of course, the egomaniac that the Hulkster is decided to inject himself into the storyline and cut Goldberg off of his rematch with Kevin Nash at the Georgia Dome. That was the idea Kevin was pitching, which was a good idea. Let him get his back. That's how the wrestling business usually works. The bad guy gets his, then the good guy comes back to get his back. And it just never came to because Hulk Hogan cut it off. And the rest is history. The finger poke of doom. Then Mick Foley, you tell your audience essentially to go over to the competition and watch Mick Foley beat The Rock. And that was just the beginning blocks of the end of the downfall of WCW. I also put on the board like Turner moved. Turner was doing a lot of other things behind the scenes, back to the corporate side of things. And again, this was the biggest part of that episode for me. It kind of told how Turner was doing business. They was doing some nasty, shady shit behind the scenes. They were allocating funds, taking away WCW's budget and allocating it to struggling brands underneath their tent. So TBS is struggling. We're going to take away some WCW budget and we're going to pump it into the books of TBS because TBS is struggling. And then now WCW has less of a budget, which cripples them even more. You've already crippled them on the creative side of things. Now you're going to cripple them on the financial side of things. It was a slow death. And it didn't matter at that moment. I'm thinking to myself, man, you know what? It didn't really matter who was in charge at that time. Because if you got the top telling, have it with an agenda that has a future with no wrestling in it, then it doesn't matter who's in charge at that point. And, they fired Eric in this episode. And then, they're laying the breadcrumbs to the Russo era, which was a mess. It was a mess. I think I might have stopped watching WCW once Eric got fired because I mean at that point it was just a mess. I mean everything was out of control. Um, I think Goldberg had got hurt at one point. Brett had gotten hurt and left, so I left basically after that. And it just went downhill after that. And they're gonna show how Russo was running things. And I'm gonna tell you though, this whole thing is kind of vindicating. Um, it's kind of vindicating Eric because it again, I didn't realize how much of a struggle Eric had just running the company the way he wanted to run it. You know, at the time as a viewer, you're watching this unfold and fall apart, and you're thinking that a lot of things is being done because this person wants to do these things. Well, that's not the case. A lot of these things, there was really nothing else you could do. We don't have the same type of creative control or freedom to do things that you once did to make you number one. Then you handicapped at that point. So, you know, it's a sad story because now you look at it and it's like, oh, well, this is the corporate machine. This is Time Warner and their shenanigans essentially that killed this company. That's what it seems like. Yeah, Eric is a front man. Eric could have did a lot better, but you know what? Eric did a lot of good shit too. I know we don't like to admit it. He did a lot of good stuff. He did a lot of stuff that never was done and still hasn't been done. No one's beat Vince since. And no one's beat the WWE since when it comes to Raw, their name brand show. So, you know what I mean? Like, you gotta get to do some credit. But overall, it was a great episode. It dived more into the destruction. Hogan, man, Hogan was like a cancer, bro. I don't really know anything he did that was good while he was there, aside from joining the company and giving it new viewers. and maybe putting over Goldberg at the Georgia Dome. Other than that, they totally mishandled Bret. How do you have? I have to put Bret Hart in this. He's my favorite wrestler. How do you? This is on Eric. You sign for $3 million a year, Bret the Hitman Hart, who was the hottest free agent at the time. He was hot as fish grease. Just came out of this all-time feud with Shawn Michaels, knocked out the boss, and left the company. And you secured that guy, and you had nothing for him. Absolutely nothing for him. How dumb was that? You had a top guy that you could have put alongside Hogan, and those two guys could have carried that company. Yeah, Goldberg came along, but you would have had three guys, three top guys, and you fumbled it. And that's because you were listening to Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was all about himself, brother. He was like, "Look, I'm gonna get cash these checks, brother. And if it don't work for me, I ain't doing it." And that's what happened. And Eric just went along with it, man. That's probably his biggest criticism. Just being Hulk Hogan's freaking puppet. Like, it's like, dude, you gotta say no sometimes. You gotta stand up and say, hey, dude, listen, this should be run like this. I paid this dude a lot of money to be an active member of these storylines in this roster. It's just, I can't just piss away that money. See, but he didn't care. And it bit him on the ass ultimately in the end. So episode 3 is coming next week. And yeah, so until then, I will see you guys next week on episode 3. After episode 3 airs, I'll give you my thoughts and opinions on that, of course, and reactions, all the reactions. All right. Until then, I'll talk to you next time. Peace.